welcome to another Florida-friendly landscaping educational program. Today we're going to talk about protecting pollinators from the cold. It's not very cold this winter, but we never know here in Florida. We could have another, a cold snap late January, early February, where it's going to go below freezing. And there are just certain things we need to talk about and be aware of. Even though we're in Florida, here in Central Florida, it is still winter and things are a little bit different for all of those critters out there in our yard. So today we're going to talk about protecting pollinators from the cold. I am Lilly Browning. I work for Hernando County Utilities in water conservation. My program is Florida Friendly Landscaping. You can email me if you'd like a PDF copy of this program at LillyB, LILLYE, at hernandocounty.us. I also have a Facebook page where you can keep up with all of our upcoming programs. Some of them are on Zoom live, and those will always be recorded so that you may watch them later. And then all of them are eventually recorded and available on Hernando County Government YouTube. Usually only takes a couple of days after I send it to them, and they'll have it available there. As I mentioned, my program is Florida Friendly Landscaping, and here are the 9 principles of Florida Friendly Landscaping. What we're going to cover today is mainly principle number 5 in attracting wildlife. Before we talk about the specifics of what to do in the winter here in Florida, we're also just going to talk about basic things in our yard that we can do all year long to invite and protect our pollinator friends. First of all, let's talk about what pollinators are. We always think about butterflies. We always think about bees and birds, but there are many other types of pollinators out there. There are beetles that are used as pollinators as well. There are moths, flies. I know some of you may be squinching up your nose about that one, but there are many, many flies out there that are not the annoying house fly or horse fly, that you're used to. There's flies like this right here that actually, kind of make themselves look like bees. They're in the hoverfly family, and they are very prolific pollinators. We have different types of pollinators, what we call purposeful pollinators, and then incidental pollinators. The most efficient and the ones who are, their specific goal is to go out there gathering nectar for themselves, and therefore they do take the pollen from one plant to the next, would be bees. Those are our most efficient types of pollinators. But there are lots of incidental pollinators who, going about their daily lives, also help us pollinate the plants. So when we are trying to attract these pollinators to our yard, there are things that we need to make available to our yard. We're not going to expect company to come over if we don't make them comfortable. So we need to provide a habitat. And habitat consists of food, shelter, water, and the proper amount of space. So let's discuss that. We also, in the shelter and the food and all of that, we need to have plant diversity. A lot of times when we think of attracting pollinators, we only think about the human-made structures that we can build. But I was just reading somewhere that, somebody wrote, plant your bird feeders, plant your insect feeders. Plants are going to attract this wildlife. Native plants will do the best job. There are non-native plants out there that also attract pollinators, but I promise you, the more native plants you have, the more insects you will have, the more pollinators you will have. It'll provide subsistence for the entire food chain in your yard. You want to have at least 15 different varieties, different kinds of plants in your yard. Sometimes we get stuck on maybe just 5 or so different types of plants repeated in our yard. The more diversity you have, the more wildlife you're going to attract. And one thing you want to do to try and attract those bees and the butterflies is schedule your seasons so that you always have 3 plants, 3 different types of plants that are blooming in each season, at least 3. So cool season, warm season, hot season, stagger the bloom times so that it's always a welcoming place for the pollinators to come. And also with diversity, not only the different types of plants, but the different sizes and shapes. We want to increase our vertical layering. We want to have small ground covers, a little bit bigger shrubs, and then even trees to increase that vertical layering that provides a lot of protection for the wildlife that we want to bring into our yard, a lot of hiding places, a lot of nesting places, different types of pollinators and even other animals such as rabbits and lizards and things like that. They all need different sheltering areas, and that vertical layering will always attract more and more types of wildlife. And it's okay to have an untidy oasis. We can have at least some areas in our yard where we let the wildflowers just grow with abandon. And it's okay to look a little bit messy because that's what the pollinators like. The pollinators don't want a perfect, manicured, very neat yard. Usually there's nothing there for them. So a little bit of mess is always okay. And there are ways in which you can incorporate the messy look into a formal landscape. And we discussed that on some of my YouTube programs that I have on Hernando County Government YouTube. There are native plants for formal landscapes and various classes like that that teach you little tricks so that you can have the sustainable wildlife friendly yard that you want while it's still pleasing maybe to your neighbors in a gated community. It will be very, very difficult, impossible really, to have pesticides and a pollinator friendly yard. If your yard gets totally broadcast sprayed, I wouldn't even suggest trying to attract the butterflies, things like that. First of all, you are harming the food source for the birds, for the lizards, things like that. And you could be harming them directly if they come in contact with that pesticide. Also, 99% of the insects in your yard are beneficial, or they're not doing anything, they're not harming anything, and they are still beneficial in that they are a food source for the other animals. So if you have problems that you need to address with pest insects, first of all, identify what the problem is. Don't treat for an insect if you don't see an insect, for one thing. And then also make sure the insect you do see is the one causing the problem. And the easiest and best way to do that is to go take it to your county extension office or take a picture of it. You can email me, or you can email the horticulture agent here in Hernando County, Bill Lester. You can email him at wlester@ufl.edu. Say, what is this? Is this insect causing a problem for me? If we determine, yes, that insect is causing a problem, the extension office will give you a plan of action where you can spot treat only with the correct pesticide, only where you have a problem. A lot of times we can provide birdhouses and bat houses. Sometimes people get them and they say, oh, nothing's ever coming. Sometimes it takes even a few years for the birds or the bats or whatever to find it. But usually after they do, you've got, they keep coming back year after year. There are specific different types of houses. You always want to clean them out after they're used, but be very, careful there. That is one way that human-made things can also augment our pollinator, loving garden. But just remember that the natural things are really what's going to bring them there. So provide seed. Again, we can do that by having feeders ready. The black seed, it seems to be what they really like the most. But you can find out, the different types of birds that you want to attract and, what will attract them. So having feeders and seeds, what that really does is brings the birds to where you can enjoy them. From sitting in your living room, sitting on your porch, if you're a photographer, it brings them, to an area where you can take a nice picture of them like I did with this chickadee. But there are other ways and more natural ways to provide seed. You have wildflowers, grasses, other native type plants. When they start looking like this, leave them like that. Even though you may think, oh, they're not pretty anymore, they're going down. Some of these seeds are going to self-seed, so you can produce more flowers. Some of them are going to be eaten by the birds and your pollinators. So that's another way to provide seed. Providing fruit. Not the best way to do that is to provide plants that have berries, that have drupes, that have other types of edible fruits for our birds. The more plants you have that way, the more birds you're going to attract. And you also want to provide protein. If you want to attract more birds, as we said before, you're not going to invite company over without making them comfortable. And a way to make them comfortable is, of course, to feed them. So another reason we don't want to use too many pesticides, or any, if you can get away with that, is the insects are a food source for our birds. Insects are going to pollinate for us, but they're also going to be a food source for the whole circle of life. Caterpillars are also a food source for birds, and sometimes that becomes a bit of a heartbreaking issue if we're trying to rear butterflies. But again, we have to understand the circle of life. Some butterflies do tend to lay a lot of eggs. And I know a lot of people trying to rear monarchs, usually they have too many caterpillars for the amount of milkweed that they have, and then they go into a panic. Well, in nature, what's going to happen there is there won't be an unnatural amount of caterpillars for the amount of plants, but also sometimes we have to realize that some caterpillars, it is their destiny in life to be a nice, soft, nutrient-rich meal for a baby bird. And we have to accept, how nature works all the way around. It's made it this far, knowing what it's doing. So sometimes we try to intervene too much, but sometimes we need to just back off and let nature take care of nature. Small reptiles for the bigger birds, sometimes frogs, lizards, maybe even squirrels and things if you have birds of prey. That's how nature works. Anytime you're trying to attract any kind of pollinators in your yard, or birds, any type of things is that, you really got to watch your pets. If you have dogs that enjoy being outside, I suggest you be out with them if they have a great interest in, catching things that maybe they shouldn't be catching. So if you are out there and control their fun out there. Cats, unfortunately, just house cats should be house cats. It's dangerous for them to be outside. I know where I live, we have a lot of coyotes, bobcats, other such things. So it's dangerous for the cats, but also the cats themselves. You may say, my cat is so fat and lazy, it's not going to catch anything. Cats don't hunt because they're hungry. Cats hunt because cats hunt. And, you know, in another time, in another day, you know, just a few years ago, we were just used to that. Our cats were outside. They'd bring us a dead bird, you know, we'd be like, oh, thanks. But now, you know, we've come to realize there's just so many feral cats and things out there that we don't need to add to the problem. We need to protect our wildlife. And of course, if you have any kind of exotic pest and you can't handle it, you know, turn it into animal control. Don't release it into the wild. That's not good for the pet. It's not good for the environment. Something you can do in your yard to attract more pollinators is create something called a pollinator hotel. This is a picture of one that the University of Florida put together. Occasionally, the extension office will, they used to before COVID, maybe they will soon again, have pollinator hotel workshops where you can create some of these, but you can see these are just bamboo tubes, different sizes, just some wood with holes drilled to attract your different type of cavity nesting bees and other pollinators. You want to be careful. There, as with everything, there's a little bit of controversy because if these tubes aren't cleaned out well, sometimes you're passing diseases on to the larvae. So if you're going to have one of these, you know, be real careful that if you know that it's empty and it's been used, before it's used again, kind of wash it out really well. Invasive non-native plants make trying to have a pollinator yard very difficult. Now, some of them do attract pollinators and birds, and that's how they get spread. But in the long run, they'll get taken and reseeded in you know, wild areas, eventually outcompete our native plants. And we still have many types of animals out there that have not adapted to plants that aren't native here. So you really disrupt the entire ecosystem. So as much as you can, learn about non-native exotic plants. I do have classes about that on YouTube. You can find lots of information from the University of Florida, from the Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants, from many other resources out there. And some of them are, you know, grown in our big box stores. So we got to learn how to recognize them and stay with either our native plants or what we call our Florida-friendly, well-behaved non-native plants. So that was a very short, how we attract pollinators, how we deal with pollinators in general. But what do? We haven't had a very cold winter yet, but we still may. So we haven't even had a frost like this yet, but we still may. We're really not out of danger till mid-March. We've even had frost like this at the beginning of April. In generalities, I'm going to say till mid-March here in Central Florida. What do we do when the temperature drops? We don't have to be as concerned about it as they are up north, but we can employ some of the same principles to keep some of our pollinators safe when it's cold. Basically, you're probably wondering, they're natural, you know, they should know what they're doing. And that's true, they do. But what we need to learn is how to not mess up what they're trying to do. That's the main thing. So in so doing, leaving the leaves, you're going to hear a lot about this if you are a part-time resident and live up north, or if you still are in touch, you know, with what's going on up north. I know this is a big campaign, leaving the leaves, leave them alone. You don't have to rake them all up. Many, many species of butterflies and moths use leaf litter for winter cover. Up north and even down here. Might be if we're going to, when we have cold fronts, they're very sudden. We don't usually acclimatize like they do up north where it gets slowly colder. We go from 80 to 20 in a day, no problem. So a lot of these pollinators will be looking for places to find some warmth. Under leaves is a great place for that. Luna moths and swallowtail butterflies actually disguise their cocoons and their chrysalises. Moths have cocoons, butterflies have chrysalises. They disguise them as dead leaves. So with your blower and you're heating them up, or with your rake and you're just moving them around or burning them or whatever, maybe you're in a place where you have to rake up at least your front yard, but find some areas where you can leave the pile. I think the silliest thing to do is put them in bags and throw them away. At least make mulch or something out of these leaves, or create piles out of sight where no one can see, and have your other areas that aren't out in center really let them just be natural, so that these pollinators do have these places to keep warm. And just remember, spiders, snails, worms, beetles, mites, other food sources. Why do we want to keep these things? Well, some of these beetles might be pollinators, but all of these things, the creepy crawly things, what are they? They're food sources for the more attractive wildlife that we want in our yard. It all works together. So here I'm taking, some work away from you. Leave the leaves. Also, this time of year, you can see this a lot in Central Florida. We have it's just the time of year, the drier time of year, we can see a lot more little tiny mounds of the sand. A lot of them, people think they're gopher tortoises. Most of the time, it's not going to be a gopher tortoise. If they are just kind of smallish holes and you see them every so often, very likely that that's one of our solitary bees. All of our native bees nest in the ground. All of our native bees, except for one, are solitary bees, like you will find here, nesting in the ground. Native bumblebees are our only gregarious, bees that stay together in groups. But what happens generally, I'm not sure if it happens here in Florida with the bumblebees. I really have to look that up. I tried to find the answer, wasn't able to. But up north, what will happen is the colony will die out and the queen will go into a protective area in the ground. And then when she comes back again in the spring, she starts a whole other colony. So the point of that is that if you go around, just try and make judicious choices where you want to plant things, or where in general you're going to disturb the ground. And just remember, there's some things nesting in there, probably not hibernating, like here in Central Florida. Some things do go into a semi-hibernation, but they're there and we don't want to disturb them. So it's just another thing to be aware of. Also, we kind of touched on this with seeds, leaving your spent, wildflowers, but also in the type of plants that have, these stems. A lot of times, some of these cavity nesting pollinators will make their homes inside the stems. So either leave them there, let them do their thing, or if for some reason you have to clear it, kind of pay attention and carefully remove those and put them in another place, in your yard, in a protected place, so they can carry on being safe inside the stems. Rotting logs and brush piles, if you're in a place where you can leave those, go ahead and leave those. That's all sorts of shelter and protection for lizards, for birds, for insects, for spiders, for all sorts of things. Remember beetles, and remember those become food sources in keeping all of those things safe. And it probably is a nice warm shelter for a lot of the critters when the temperature drops. Your butterflies. Butterflies are a whole nother issue. I would not purposefully go out of my way to attract butterflies this time of year, especially monarchs, and we're going to get into that. But it's warm and, you know, things are growing. So the butterflies are still around. There's not much we can do about that. So for the ones that are around, we can provide, see, this is very easy, you know, so it's like a bird bath or a large saucer under a plant, fill it up with sand and some nice stones so butterflies can stop. Lizards will probably take advantage of this too. Bask in the sun for a while, keep warm. Another thing that butterflies really like are these little mudding areas where they have their mouth is a tube like a straw called a proboscis. And it kind of just puddles things up like a sponge. And in mud puddles like this, they can get a lot of moisture and they can also get minerals from the ground. So that's just something nice to provide as well. Don't keep it too wet because you don't want to attract mosquitoes as well. So let's talk about some of the flowers. I said you should try to have 3 species that are blooming in each season. I'm going to cover a few of the plants that'll bring you flowers in the winter. There's more than this, and I'm sure you can go out in your yard and see what you have. And some of them might be just doing just fine, but if we get a good freeze, you know, they'll be frozen to the ground before they come back. So, but let's talk about what you can grow this winter because pollinators do need year-round food sources. As I mentioned, I was going to talk about monarchs in the winter. One of my classes I have is Florida Friendly Gardening for the part-time gardener, and I'm talking to snowbirds there. And what I try to say to snowbirds is enjoy your butterfly gardens wherever it is you go up north in the summer. Like I said, some things, because it's been warm, are just growing naturally, and we do have some butterflies right now. But when it comes to monarchs, and I know a lot of times, you know, people get very excited about breeding them, rearing them. I would encourage that you use native milkweeds, a little bit harder to find. There are 3, they're working on a couple more commercially available native milkweeds. You're usually going to find them at a native plant sale. Perhaps the Hernando County Master Gardeners from time to time do. They go to a native plant nursery and bring stuff back to sell to us. So there is tuberosa, which is an orange milkweed, Asclepias tuberosa, which usually grows in kind of sandy areas. The other ones are perennis, and I lost the name, but there's a white one and a pink one, and they usually grow more in swampy areas. The one that we're going to walk into the big box store and find is Asclepias cursivata, tropical milkweed. That's the ones that yellow, orange. It's becoming more and more of a problem. The biggest problem with it is it doesn't know when to go down. These natives, they kind of go down for the winter. I say that, but I still have a few who are, because it's been so warm, they're hanging on out there. But not as vigorously as you will find with the tropical milkweed. It's from Mexico. It just doesn't know that it's wintertime now and I should, you know, cut back. So why is that a problem? Because we have the monarchs come here and get confused into staying. It does not encourage them to move further south to the Keys, to Mexico, wherever it is, you know, that they're going. They hang out here. Remember, I mentioned sometimes we go from 80 to 20. We don't want the monarchs around if that happens. They will freeze. Also, what are they doing there? I mean, it's a host plant, so they're planting eggs. So then the, chrysalises hatch. You have brand new monarchs. It's January. Say it's not a warm January like now. What are they going to nectar on? Even though we have, some good flowers right now, it's still not the same amount that we normally would have in the warmer times. So they might not find anything to eat. Also, the other issue is monarchs carry around a parasite. Naturally, they always have. It's part of what they do. Has a very long name. We're going to call it IO. But if these plants are encouraging them to stick around longer than they should, they're not practicing social distancing. I know they're not in Mexico, but that's more natural of what's supposed to happen at that time. They can pass this parasite around more readily. Does not hurt the adult monarchs, it will kill the caterpillars. So, that's an issue as well. And then I am reading more and more things where they are looking at tropical milkweed as possibly being an invasive non-native. So, just all this reading, all this evidence piling up is not pointing to tropical milkweed as being a Florida-friendly plant at all. If you do have it, and you're very reticent to get rid of it, I would just ask that you cut it back in November. It's going to keep trying to come back because it's been so warm. Keep it cut back until mid-March, when we're at least not going to have a freeze anymore. But here are some Florida-friendly winter bloomers that will help the butterflies, the insects, the bees, and the birds that are all out there wanting to pollinate. Climbing Aster is a wonderful winter bloomer. I have a friend who swears they smell like sugar cookies. If you get them going, they're going to be going like gangbusters. So you do need a lot of room for them to climb, but that's a great native to have. Here's some others. These are all natives as well. At least this type of sage is. It's tropical sage, scarlet sage, I'm sorry. Salvia cocosina, I believe is what it's called. But you can use other salvias as well. You can use the dark blue salvias. You can use the white, the pink. I have all of those as well as this native, and they love this dry weather. They really like it dry. And right now they are some of the main things attracting all the little hoverflies, all the bumblebees, all of that to my yard. This narrow leaf sunflower, we call it a winter bloomer, but really it's late fall because mine were done before Christmas, but they were fabulous at Thanksgiving. And I have left them. I have left them standing there, looking unattractive, but with those seeds there to, again, also provide seeds for the birds. And twin flower is a nice ground cover, a native ground cover that also attracts butterflies, insects, birds, things like that. Two of these at least are non-natives, but they're great pollinator attractors. This fire spike, what are these red tubular flowers going to attract? Absolutely, we are going to attract hummingbirds. We're also going to get some nice long-tongued bees as well. I'll skip over right now to the firecracker plant. Again, red tubular flowers, blooms pretty much all year. Doesn't bloom as prolifically in the winter, but it still does bloom. Provides a nice, weepy looking kind of shrub and attracts those long-tongued beetles, long-tongued bees, and hummingbirds. I skipped over the porterweed. Porterweed is one of those plants that plant people have a controversy about. if you're wanting to make sure you get the native kind of falls down and sprawls. It doesn't produce the brown shrub-like, plant that the non-native porterweeds. And apparently there's so many different plants that people have thrown into the porterweed family. So then the plant people are always arguing about, what do we call a porterweed? What do we not call a porterweed? With the word Jamaica in it, we are pretty sure that we're going to get the Florida native, even though it has Jamaica in it. And that just watch its habit too, because someone gave me one and then I was a little freaked out that, oh no, it's dying because it started crawling on the ground, but that is actually what it is supposed to do. Some shrubs, we all have these naturally. I was talking in another class that people seem bound and determined to get rid of our saw palmettos when they have them in their yard because, well, there are snakes under them. There could be. And not just rattlesnakes, there could be any kind of snakes, any kind of shelter like that could have some snakes, that's true. But there are about 400 different types of birds, lizards, squirrels, you name it, that make a saw palmetto a home. Your Florida black bear loves to eat the berries. It is home to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wildlife. So what I do is I don't keep it close to the house for a couple of reasons. It's flammable. And I don't want coyotes hiding in big bushes of it near my fenced in area with my little teeny tiny little doglets that I have. Back of the yard, absolutely. Go ahead and stay there. Wax myrtle is a nice native bush that you can train into a small tree. Great replacement for a ligustrum. And it also is going to attract many, many, many different types of bees and birds and insects and wonderful things. Simpson stopper, here's some of that fruit that might attract some of those birds. These it's hard to see from this close-up, but they make pretty large bushes that will make good screening for you. More shrubs. I'm showing, I believe this is probably an East Palaka holly here, which is a native hybrid. Native purists don't like that word, but that's what it is. Because it's the nice soft leaves there. Any kind of holly is going to bring you birds. And probably insects and bees as well. Sparkleberry is a native bush. It's in the Vaxillium family, in the blueberry family. Really nice bush to have around. And our firebush. That is another one you have to be careful if you are looking for the native. The native is more red and shorter. And also its name is Hamelia patens, Hamelia patens. That's its scientific name if you're looking. This is another controversy among native plant enthusiasts in that there are non-native firebush around that a lot of people get confused. Your native is going to attract more wildlife just because the wildlife is more familiar with it. And it has long tubular flowers as well, which is going to bring you your hummingbirds. Mine, the sulfur butterflies, yellow ones, really love them. And they are easy to find and easy to grow. We can have some annuals too. Annuals are not that great at attracting pollinators, but there are a few. And the thing with annuals and even a lot of the perennials and things like that, the more hybridized a plant is, the less nature knows that it's a plant. So You think a lot of your hybrid teas or a lot of like the double flowered type of plants. The more humans kind of mess with it, and they have their place. They're pretty, they might work well for your needs. But the further it is away from its original source, the we're speeding evolution up mind-bogglingly fast, and so that the critters can't keep up with that. So they don't know that it's a plant that they should use. So there are some annuals out there that, the bees and the pollinators still recognize, and ones that bloom very well in our winter that also attract pollinators are going to be your petunias, your zinnias, and your calendulas, your pot marigolds. Just things to think about having around. So to wrap this all up, in order to attract those pollinators all year, you're going to have to provide that habitat, food, water, shelter, and space. Plant diversity, different types of plants and different shapes and sizes and levels of plants. Be a little bit untidy. The pollinators like that. Reduce, eliminate pesticides, if at all you can. Provide food, accept the circle of life in providing that food. It's not always what you provide, seed-wise, things like that. Let it be provided in your yard by letting there be insects so that our other pollinators can have food to eat to continue, the circle of life. Manage the pets, manage your pets. Don't let them disrupt the course of nature in your yard. Incorporate some pollinator hotels, just be real careful about keeping them clean, and control those invasive plants in your yard. Now, what to do in the winter for these pollinators, specifically, leave the leaves, have some nice, even pine needles, things like that piled up for them. Don't disturb the ground if at all possible. Leave your spent flowers and your plants. Flowers are going to provide seeds. The stems are going to provide nice hiding places and nesting places for a lot of our insects. Have some brush piles or leave some logs to rot. And also for the butterflies and even the lizards and all those others, provide some basking areas and mudding areas. Here are some of the resources that I gleaned from to get some of this information for you. Also, if you want to follow up with some of my other Florida-friendly classes that also explore these same subjects, you go to Hernando County Government YouTube and look on my playlist, Florida-friendly landscaping playlist, you'll find beneficial bugs, plain pollinators, pulling in the pollinators, and another one, weeds or wildflowers, an introduction to overlooked pollinator plants. That's just a few. I have a lot of classes on there, but these will cover more in this area that we talked about today. We have upcoming classes. Dr. Lester just recorded a class for me right before this one, and he's covering what could go wrong in the vegetable garden. So keep an eye out on Facebook and YouTube for that one. This one will be available on Facebook and YouTube very soon as well. Then January 19th, covering the same kind of ideas of what could go wrong, Dr. Lester agreed to do a two-part series, one on diagnosing plant problems in your home landscape. That's part one on January 19th. January 25th, I have an in-person compost bin and rain barrel workshop at the county extension office at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's filling up quickly, so you can email me to find out about that. February 2nd, Dr. Lester will have part two on diagnosing plant problems in your home landscape. Also, on January 22nd, that's a Saturday. This is also filling up quickly. If you are interested in a in a rain barrel or in a compost bin or both. Compost bins are free for Hernando County residents only, 1 bin per household. Rain barrels till February 1st are $50. And we'll have this one on a Saturday outside at Fickett Hammock Preserve here in Hernando County. Not only will we enjoy the great workshop outside, Mike Singer is our environmentally sensitive lands specialist, and he's going to talk to us about Fickett Preserve and take us on a walk through there. So if either of those opportunities do interest you, the way you register and find out more information for the rain barrel workshop, the only way that can be done is to email me at LillyB@hernandocounty.us. I said it's filling up quickly, but I do want you to know after February 1st, the prices of rain barrels will be rising because our bulk price went up as well. Again, thank you for listening today to this information about protecting pollinators from the cold. I am Lilly Browning. You can find me on Facebook.com, Hernando FFL program, or on Hernando County Government YouTube. And feel free, email is the best way to try and reach me. Don't do Facebook message. I don't look at it, often enough. My email, I will see it as soon as possible. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you again for another Florida-friendly landscaping seminar.